Thank you very much, everybody. I also want to take just a second. I want to thank everybody again. There's a very special group here I want to acknowledge, and that is our real estate scholars. There are 4 students who received the Grant Center's Real Estate Program Scholarship for the 2019-20 academic year. And we have Samuel DeFiore, a finance major from Boston, Massachusetts, Austin Johnson, a finance major from Conway, South Carolina, Aaron McQuaid, an accounting major from Sayreville, New Jersey, and Alexis Sweet, a management major from Lake Villa, Illinois. Students, if you could all rise and just let everybody see you. They're in different places throughout the room. Thank you. We're very proud of these students, and it's been great working with them over the last year and a couple years for some of them as well. I want to thank Hattie Jordan. Hattie is the program assistant for the Grant Center for Real Estate and Economics, and I really cannot express how much of a, I don't want to say help, but a game changer for me for this summit. This is just one event that we put on, and the things that we do in the college, in the center, that she just really just takes the lead on and makes happen. This summit, last year, some of you were here, was our first time both in the spring and also at Marina and Grand Dunes, and with a network session for students and employers and employees. The change was just very successful, just being a part of this and seeing everything. I'm just proud of what she's done and thankful, and to see everybody in the crowd, I just want you to know how much we appreciate what she's done, and I thank you again for supporting her and us. I also want to thank Tony Grant. Tony has been here with the Real Estate Center, this is now 5 years almost, and really helped us look at the way our center was doing things in a completely new way. We have always focused on outreach and doing the forecasting and working with the business community, liaising back and forth. I have been involved in that work here since 2010. We really increased the student-centric focus of our center, particularly with our real estate program. And that really has made all the difference. I have been working with students on research in other countries, in other parts of the state, and really a big part of that is because of the way we have changed and really just innovated our program, and I can't thank Tony enough for that. And then finally, I know many of you have heard about the Institute for Principal Development that we're also working to build in the college, in the Grant Center. Many of our supporters with that movement are here in the room. Some of the speakers are here today to speak on the issues that are so important to that institute, and I just want to thank you for that. And any questions you have, please feel free at the network session and any other time. We are happy to entertain those and look forward to your thoughts and encouragement as we move forward. So thank you again. Okay. All right, so my part of the day, or the morning, I would say, it's not a day, don't be scared, of the morning is the outlook for the economy. And the way I do this is I start with the U.S. economy usually, then get down to the state, and then talk about our local economy. Today, I want to start with who we are and why that is so important. So I am going to look at the Southeast very quickly. And I'll just look at population. I teach my students in market analysis and working with some other folks in the region in appraisal and valuation. Population, employment, and income, those are 3 economic factors that you must understand, and how those dynamics change to gauge how your economy is doing, where it's going, where it's been, the types of businesses that are moving in or moving out. So the first thing I want to look at is population. And there is no question, Horry County is a fast-growing county. The Southeast is a fast-growing part of the country. So what I have on this board, this is looking at the counties, and this is Horry County. You can see 2 clusters, right? So the top cluster, going all the way back to 1970, there were the bigger metro areas in the state of South Carolina. That's about 250,000 people for each one of those in 1970. Horry County was down below 100,000, okay, down in the bottom cluster. And you look over time, both the trajectory For Horry County, even compared to others, circled in red, it is now, as you know, of course, a county that is 340,000 people, and the growth is significant both in terms of relative to others, but for us, it certainly creates a lot of challenges, a lot of opportunities. And part of the reason we're discussing some of the issues that we are with the Institute for Principal Development is because of the growth that we have, which we welcome the growth for sure. Now let's start to look at that in some different ways. Population density. This is 2018 data, select counties. On the left, so this is, you can't read it, Greenville, then Richland, Charleston, York. Then we have Horry County, then Berkeley, Brunswick, Georgetown. All right, Greenville County, which is our largest county in the state, the population density is 655 people per square mile. All right, Horry County is at 300. So just keep things in context. Remember, we are supposedly, I think it's the 5th largest county land area east of the Mississippi, all right? So that's important to keep in mind when we talk about growth and the way it affects our prices, our job market. For example, we're talking population density. Many firms look at demand density, right? How far does a pizza place have to go to deliver a certain number of pizzas, right? Population density matters for that. So, and that's just a simple example. But for some perspective, I put Franklin County, Ohio up here. Why? It's in the Midwest, it's in Ohio, it's not New York City. I lived there for 5 years. That's Columbus, Ohio, all right? I never considered that to be a very dense urban area. It's very, I guess you would say, sprawled out. It has a beltway that goes around it. I lived out on the beltway, worked for Nationwide Insurance. Its population density is 2,186 people per square mile. 2,186, compared to Greenville at 655, compared to Horry County at 300. It's 7 times more dense than us, and I'm telling you, when I lived there, it's almost like farm country. In fact, when I moved there from the mountains of West Virginia, I was very scared that the wind was going to take me away, right? There was nothing to stop it, nothing at all. And I never really got over that. And so that, to me, that puts things in really important perspective that we all should keep in mind. We're not bursting at the seams. Sometimes it feels like we are. Sometimes the traffic on 501 is just frustrating, right? But in reality, in fact, when one of the speakers was driving in and his GPS wasn't functioning, he was asking me for some markers. I couldn't think of one. My wife was with me and she couldn't help me. And I thought, wow, we have no mile markers to speak of. There's a Hampton Inn, but it's so far off the road you can't even see it. If I tell him to go there, he's not going to see it. So I drove out and met him, right? And that's how I accommodated that. But if we would have been, in Columbus, there are so many different markers you could have named, and it would have been fairly simple, all right? So that is important for our region. Median value of owner-occupied single-family homes. This is the 2014 to 2018 average from the census, the median value of just single family, all right? So on the left is Charleston at $295,600. That's the median value of a single family home in Charleston County. Brunswick, which is the new county in our MSA, North Carolina, just at $200,000. Now that's very interesting. As soon as you see Brunswick, and if I had its population density, and anyone who goes over to Brunswick, that's got to be the ocean driving that. More so than even here, right? That is a big factor there. Georgetown County, also very interesting, 187,200. York County, 186,000. Berkeley, 174,000. Horry, 172,500. Then Greenville, 172,100. Richland, 158,200. The U.S. median is about 205,000. So you want to keep that in perspective too. The price of living here for a family, basically, right? All right. Labor force participation. So let me go back real quick. So when we think about the population density, the growth, but then the price of the median home at 172,500, yet you look at Georgetown, which is actually more expensive than us, but its economy is nothing compared to Horry County, all right? And then you look at Brunswick, which is also more expensive than us. The economy is nothing compared to Horry County. What kinds of things could be driving this, all right? So we got demand drivers and we have supply drivers, right? So let's start to look at some of these. Labor force participation. I was just at a conference this weekend in Asheville with two of my students here that are research fellows, Legacy of Liberty fellows. And we were sitting with, one of the students wants to go to grad school, and one of the places she's looking at is WVU. So we're sitting with the chair of the econ department at WVU, and she's doing a study on the opioid epidemic and the effect, the causes and effects of the opioid epidemic on the real estate markets in West Virginia. It's an interesting study. The first thing you look at is, okay, so why is, let's say West Virginia, why is West Virginia, this seems like ground zero for the opioid epidemic? The obvious answer for an economist is labor force participation. West Virginia is number 51, if you include Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C. is number 1 in terms of labor force participation. West Virginia is the lowest labor force participation in the United States of America. It is the green line, okay? We're number 48 as a state. South Carolina has the 3rd lowest labor force participation in the United States of America. We all must keep that in mind, right? When we talk about, I started getting interested in labor force participation more from a macroeconomic perspective after the recession, and as we were trying to get out of it. A guy named Richard Caglick is with the Federal Reserve of Richmond, based in Charlotte. Now he's up, I think at the Cleveland Fed or Cincinnati Fed. But anyway, we were both giving talks together at different places around the state, and he would do the Federal Reserve, approach to this, and he was always dissecting labor force participation. And when you talk about 3% growth in GDP years ago, 2% today, a whole lot of that is explained by this significant drop in labor force participation nationwide. So back to South Carolina really quick. It is this blue line. And, unfortunately, that line has come down quite a bit. There was a little blip here recently, even for West Virginia and almost every state on this chart. But let's look at something else. This is labor force participation measured in 2 ways. The general way that it's reported is the population 16 and above, okay? Well, when you say the population 16 and above, you've got retired people in that, right? And anyone would say, well, shoot, that's why your labor force participation is so low today, because of the retirees, right? The large segment of the population that's at retirement age. But the 25 to 54-year-old labor force participation gets rid of that effect for the most part, right? So red is the prime working age population, all right? And this is for, there's D.C., Iowa, which was number 1 state, Illinois, which is the average state, Georgia, North Carolina, Florida, South Carolina, and West Virginia. So 25 to 54, South Carolina is, it's close to Georgia. It's above West Virginia, but it's nowhere near the average or certainly the top. And then you can compare, the blue is the total workforce, labor force participation. Okay, now I think should be another, okay. This one is taking the 25 to 54-year-old labor force participation. Same metric, measured in 1999 and measured in 2019 for each of these same areas. It went down significantly nationwide, right, over a 20-year period. So South Carolina, the 25 to 54-year-old population was participating in the labor force at just under 85%. Today is just over 81%, okay? So we really should all be asking ourselves, and I thank Jimmy for explaining the way that advocacy is led and is worked at all levels of government, all levels of all types of people in the private sector. Labor force participation in this country has dropped significantly for the working age people. And we could also sort it out, and I did this, but I just had to cut some slides, between male and female, the changes that have happened over time with that. You really need to look at all these things. We want to look at our policies from a national perspective and say, what has happened in this country in the last 20 years that has caused the working age person to be working less? My interest is in Social Security disability. And if anyone has heard my talks, you've heard me discuss that. And that's what I'm interested in for the student of mine who hopefully is going to grad school for econ, looking at the opioid epidemic. I believe there's a relationship there, and it's something that's interesting and personal to me coming from Huntington, West Virginia. All right, so I just wanted to put that into context. And lastly, the total labor force population. The U.S. average is 64.5. Horry, so now going down to counties, I'm sorry. Horry is at 56.8. Again, compared to 64.5. So Horry County now, talking about us right here, is about 8 points below the U.S. average in terms of labor force participation. Georgetown is 4 points below Horry. Brunswick is below 50, below 50. So labor force participation in our immediate region is extremely low. If you look at South Carolina, real quickly, York County is the only county on this chart that is actually above the national average. Educational attainment. Percent of population 25 and over with at least a bachelor's degree. You can look at high school diploma as well. In the interest of time, I'm looking at just a bachelor's degree right now. Charleston is the first, then Richland, Greenville, York, Berkeley, Brunswick, Georgetown, Horry. Horry County, right here, has the lowest educational attainment college in the state on this chart. Okay, there are others that would be lower here, but on this chart, all right? The U.S. average is 31.5. Horry it's about 23.5 is about what it is, okay? It's a significant drop in terms of relative to the U.S. average. That's important because it's a determinant of income. Median family income, select counties. The U.S. median family income, and the reason I put family now is we usually use household income in our research. Median household income, very easy to get. However, there's a big difference in household income and family income. A household, as we know at Coastal Carolina University, someone living in a student housing complex or a house in Carolina Forest that they're renting, there's 4 people in it, that's a household as far as census is concerned, and their income is not going to look very good, right? But there's nothing wrong with that. That's transition to a better income earning potential as they move out of college and into the workforce. Family income should, for the most part, get rid of that type of thing, right? So families. The U.S. is at 73.9. Charleston is at 80,754. Charleston, in spite of having lower labor force participation than the nation, it's a very high income area, and its property prices actually show that. Charleston is an expensive place to live. There's supply constraints and there's demand drivers competing for, a good place to live in Charleston. York County, right outside of Charlotte, also very high income, 77,681. Greenville is less than the average at basically 71,000. Richland is similar. Berkeley drops to about 68. Brunswick, 66. Georgetown, 61. Horry County, 57.7. I'm not trying to be pessimistic up here, but to paint the accurate picture of where we are, where we're trying to get, the different policies that we consider for all different types of things, let's not forget 57,000 compared to 74,000 basically at the U.S. We are not a rich in terms of the median family, not a rich area of the country, right? Hold on, I know that I have, okay, so again, go back to this slide, educational attainment. So it's the lowest on the chart. That's very important. Okay, after all that, I'll now move into the actual outlook for the region. First, GDP. So a lot of people asked me 4 days ago, what would you have put on this chart, right? I'll let Warren Buffett speak for me on this one, okay? I've got some slides that show the stock market, the S&P 500, but my quarterly outlook forecast with the Waccamaw Regional Council of Governments Economic Outlook Board was just in, I think we did it in February, wasn't that long ago. And I had a little slide that said coronavirus. Immediate impact, but shouldn't be very lasting. It literally says that, it's published. Honestly, I never would have dreamed this thing would be going all over the world almost. But still do believe as much information as you can gather about the coronavirus or COVID-19, the lasting effects. I don't have anything built into this, and nor would I put anything built into this to change this outlook, all right? And so that's kind of my feelings about it. 2% GDP growth, I mean, that's just been our average for the better part of a decade or two. And 2019 third quarter was 2.1. 2019 second quarter was 2.0. 2% is just, that's how our economy is moving on average, right? Okay, let's look at U.S. retail sales. This goes from 1992 through today. I love not adjusting these to seasonal detrending because it's so important for us. We are a seasonally fluctuating. It's very important that we understand that. And so I always use the seasonal numbers. It doesn't really matter as long as you check back year over year. In October, we were at $525 billion for the U.S. That was a $19 billion gain year over year. All right, so you can see the recession back in 2009 here, and just see this movement that has just been very consistent. Longest expansion in modern history. U.S. private non-farm employment, also unadjusted, was 153 million people employed in December. That was a gain of 2.1 million people year over year. And you can see that movement as well, right? And so right now, as far as coronavirus, the only thing that's being picked up right now in the United States is in the stock market, right? However, The Economist just the other day, it was an article about this major factory in China and this major wholesale market that is bringing people to work. In fact, they're going to pay for the flights for 100 million migrant workers in China to return to work, okay? And no threat of the 14-day quarantine. The wholesale market in China, I don't know if any of you have ever thought about getting something made in China and distributing in the United States. Well, that's where you do it, right? 700 soccer fields is the size of this wholesale market. 700, right? And they're going back to work. At the same time, we hear on the news here that things are getting worse with coronavirus. So it's hard to know what exactly is going on, but if you look for economic indicators very locally, China seems to think they're getting some sort of handle on this, and they can maybe start getting back to working. And think how much they've been affected by this, right? The unemployment rate, January, was 3.6%. A few weeks ago at our Economic Outlook Board meeting, I did look at unemployment rate going back through history. I think World War II era was the lowest it maybe had ever been. So this is, we're certainly approaching, the question is, what is the natural rate of unemployment? And it turns out that we just have an economy and a system. Frictional unemployment is very low. The time it takes people to find any type of job is much shorter than it used to be. And so we have a low unemployment rate in the peak of our business cycle, without question. The S&P 500 index. So this was the slide I had just presented at the Quarterly Outlook Board meeting this month, actually. And then now I should have the updated slide with this. But I like showing that slide, not because I like pain, but because of this slide. Oh, wait. Don't even tell me that I did. Oh, yeah, there it is. Okay. This was the slide I presented here a year ago. The exact slide, okay? that would look like the slide that I should have put on today, okay? So my point is markets are fickle, right? This was the Federal Reserve, right? This was the rate increases back a year ago into, I think it was November, December. My mind forgets things really quickly, but that was what was going on there, and everybody thought, oh my God, interest rates are going to start going up, this Fed chair is different, all that stuff. And then we were here, right, a year later. But now we're the same exact thing for a completely different reason. And if I go back 2 quarters ago, talking about, I told the group that I work with, some of you are in this room, I said, yeah, I don't really get into forecasting when the recession is going to come. Some kind of unforeseen shock probably is going to do, right? And all of a sudden, coronavirus. So, you know, maybe that does send GDP negative for a quarter or two. You know, I don't know. But anyway, fickle markets, right? 30-year fixed rate mortgage. This is probably a slide that I would have used last year as well, and then I just update it. And so we're now at 3.45%. So Fed reverse course, and that's related to what I was saying just a minute ago. That's 30-year fixed rate mortgage. U.S. National Home Price Index, the S&P Case-Shiller. Let me check my time. So I've got about 15 minutes. Is that right? Okay. So this is going back to 1988 through largely the present. Okay. So you can see how nationwide home price appreciation over and above what it was in the boom before the recession. U.S. single-family building permits. You know, we're different as a state and certainly as a region than the nation. We have eclipsed our volume since the boom. The nation has not. One of the reasons, and one of our speakers, Rox, the Appraisal Institute, you would see if you went to the Appraisal Institute South Carolina annual meeting, multifamily nationwide has been a big deal since the recession. We're not as much of a multifamily place relative to the nation, right? So that's one of the things that makes it different for us. How money walks. I'm just going to show a few of these. Some of you have seen these before. This is very interesting. This also helps us explain and understand who we are, right? This is IRS tax migration data for the United States. You can go to a website, howmoneywalks.com. The green means money's moving to those states. The red means it's leaving those states, okay? South Carolina, bam, we are attracting, you know, people and their money are moving to South Carolina. We know that. That's our business model. Second homes, retirees, and anyone else like Jimmy and myself that desire to be in the Southeast and run when it's at least 55 degrees or something like that, right? So cold morning, but no big deal. I don't really run that much. So, all right, South Carolina, where gained, where lost. This is important. I can't read this for now. We gained from New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Ohio. No shock to anybody, right? But also North Carolina. I think that's pretty interesting, right? We lost wealth to, this is fascinating, Idaho, Montana, Oregon, and Washington. I have to be honest with you. If you ask my wife, or my kids, or my childhood friends from home, Salvino, if you ever left South Carolina, where would you move? I'd say Idaho, Montana, Oregon, Washington, Colorado, Utah. I ski, all right, that's what. Those are snow states, right? You talk about a stark contrast, but it turns out that those states are also attracting a lot of people. So the interesting thing is also beautiful places to live, beautiful views of the mountains. Some of them are no income tax states. Washington on this list, Washington might be the only one. But Idaho, the cheap alternative to Colorado. I think my Colorado friends in the room might agree. So anyway, that's fascinating to me and important for us to keep in mind. And then this is Horry County. Where did we get people from? Suffolk County, New York. Fairfax County, Virginia. Nassau County, New York. Prince William County, Virginia. And Anne Arundel County, Maryland. How about that? No surprise to anybody in the room, right? Where did we lose people to? Georgetown, I live in Georgetown County, but I always have since I moved here. Charleston County, Greenville County. So the top 3 places people move to from Horry County is in our own state, not that very far away, all right? That's important to keep in mind. But also Orange County, Florida, which is Orlando, and Pinellas County, Florida, which I think is Tampa. Is that right? Yeah, Tampa. Okay. So, fine places, been there. You can check out these charts for any county you want to. It's very interesting. That is the average from 1992, I think, to the present. Not the average. It's actually aggregated if you actually look at it. It took me a while to figure out what the heck they were measuring. Okay. South Carolina gross state product, 1997 to 2018. Very nice looking trend line. We're a growing state. $233.9 billion in 2018. 46,006 GSP per capita. Population up 62,908 to 5.08 million people. We're about half the size of North Carolina. Our economy is about half the size of North Carolina. That's why I say population is still an important metric, even without knowing some of the other things. South Carolina, neighboring states. So South Carolina is the blue line. That's just size, right? North Carolina is orange, Georgia is gray, and Florida is gold. Florida's interesting because look at the trajectory as well. The very steep trajectory. I can't speak to that. Maybe someone else can. Next. All right. State growth rates. Annual percent growth across states 1998 to 2018. Certainly of late, convergence, North Carolina and South Carolina. But South Carolina has been growing at a faster rate since the recession than North Carolina. Some of that has been we were more housing heavy on average as a state than North Carolina. So as that resurged, we had a sharp fall, but then the increase has been significant. South Carolina retail sales in billions. October of 19 was 19.8 billion. The previous year, October, was 18.9 billion. So pretty robust growth. South Carolina single family permits. So what on the US slide, what I should have made sure to point out was this arc here is higher than the pre-boom over here, right, for South Carolina. For the US, it's not, okay? That's the important thing to keep in mind. So 2019 total for South Carolina permits, about 28,000 permits for the year, single family in the state, compared to just a little less than 28,000, so it's basically it's even, but it's a little bit higher this year compared to last year for the state. But certainly we see something leveling out for sure, right? So something to pay attention to. South Carolina employment, also, you see almost a double peak there, right? Which is something to keep in mind in terms of wondering where it might start to go the other direction. The unemployment rate in December was 2.4%. It was 3.3% in December of 18. Employment, 2.32 million in December. It was 2.25 million the previous December. Annual single-family permits for South Carolina looked at another way, 18, 19, so we see a little bit higher, and that was what happened prior. Annual single-family permits for Horry County. 17 was a big year, 18 dropped, 19 coming back up. All right, and as far as demand, it looks like that will continue, but again, if a recession happens for the U.S. economy, we'll certainly follow that. This is Georgetown County. Now the bars look similar, but the magnitude is very different. Let me see if I can show. Okay, yeah, that's 7,000 is the top line. That's 800 is the top line. So it's like 10% of Horry County's size. And a pretty big drop off there, but it's more variance in Georgetown County because of the smaller market. Hotel, condo, hotel, campground occupancy rate. These are the charts we regularly monitor on a quarterly basis. 2020, first and second quarters, we're looking at continued growth. Basically, we have seen moderate growth in terms of occupancy in this segment of the tourism economy, the hotels, hotels, and campgrounds. Occupancy is, if occupancy, we always discuss with different professionals, if it's even flat, but if we're adding more beds, and we cannot control in the data for Airbnb, for example, right? So if we're flat occupancy, it means we're actually doing really well, right? But this is growing a little bit. Average daily rate, same segment. So I'll look at the third quarter bars, these tall bars, and just read them out real quick, just so you have some perspective. The 3 summer months averaged $168.90 in 2016, $174.80 in 17, $175.50 in 18, $179.30 in 19. And that's the 3 summer months averaged. Obviously, when you look at July a little more closely, you're going to see a significant higher number, and that's how we move in terms of business in that segment. Accommodations tax revenue. 2019 third quarter was $13.3 million, and this is Horry County and a little bit from Georgetown County as well. We add those together, but it's mainly Horry County. One thing to note, we used to use the hospitality fee, the 1.5% countywide hospitality fee, but as of July 1st, that's no longer remitted to the county from the different municipalities. That dropped off about 67% across the board, month after month. That's about to change. And so now we're using accommodations tax revenue as by force a more reliable indicator of the activity from that perspective. Regional single-family permits. This is a little bit of a repeat, but you can see the movement in a different way, adding Georgetown and Horry County together. Very important for counties in terms of data reporting. Williamsburg County is part of our Economic Outlook Board region. It's always 0 permits. Finally, somebody said, my neighbor just built a house. How could it be 0? I said, good question. I said, but it probably means nobody in Williamsburg County is reporting those permits to the census. And I use the state of the city's data system because I can compare any county, any jurisdiction in the United States. Point, California just enacted solar panel on roofs required for any new home constructed. One of my colleagues and I were discussing, is this a good idea or a bad idea? And I said, well, I've owned quite a few homes. And I know that if I had to put solar panels on my roof, I would at least take a little bit more time to try to understand what that was going to mean in terms of all kinds of stuff. Not just the budget directly, but how's that going to affect the waterproofing of the roof, right? I freak out about that kind of stuff. So we pulled some jurisdictions outside of Orange County and looked at their December. Already it showed up. Huge drop off in single family permits that looks like it might be from that, right? So we pay attention to those kinds of things. But if counties or municipalities aren't reporting, we can't measure them. Here, multifamily permits. Anybody who drives up and down 17 will see gargantuan complexes of multifamily housing community, apartment communities, right? But they don't necessarily show up on this database. And this became a problem. We used to try to forecast multifamily permits. One thing, it's a lot more volatile, so it's hard to forecast, but it's least important to measure. But if a lot of your jurisdictions aren't even reporting them at all to this type of database, you can't really measure them and compare them to any other place. So it's very important to report data, be transparent with that type of public information because it helps researchers just get a handle on things. You know, if we can't give you any idea how many multifamily permits, then we just can't even discuss it in any meaningful way. Georgetown County retail sales. The most important thing to look at is how the trend is moving. Georgetown had a little bit of a setback the last year. Horry, you don't really see that as much, okay? We've discussed it a lot, what exactly was happening in Georgetown County that might have been responsible for a little bit of a decline in retail sales. There's no real good explanation or solid explanation for it. It's just something that we noticed and we just continue to monitor, especially compared to Horry County, which doesn't show that. Employment, I should probably adjust the bottom of the graph in the future, but the growth is pretty robust. If I look at 2019 third quarter, that's 153,200 jobs, 153,200. Go back to the 18 third, that's 147,000. That's 6,000 more jobs year over year in Horry County. So it's certainly significant growth in employment. Georgetown, much smaller, 25,500 in the third quarter, which is our summer quarter, compared to 24,900. So that was about 600 jobs. It was 10%, again, like we said. Same with single-family permits, right? Unemployment rate, Georgetown County, the fourth quarter got down to 2.5%. That's compared to 4.1% the previous year's fourth quarter. And then Horry County, fourth quarter was 2.3 compared to 3.8 the previous year. I mean, I'm telling you, someone trying to forecast these, I never would have forecasted a 1.5% drop in the unemployment rate year over year at the peak of the business cycle, right? But that's where we are. Conclusion. Okay, so as that shocked me. This goes back to when I was at Marshall University for undergrad, graduating in 1997. And I tell students of mine, I do not even remember my last semester. I don't tell my professors that. But I was applying for jobs. I was interviewing, my wife and I both. And we had jobs before we even graduated. And we moved to Springfield, Ohio, all right, which then became Dayton and became Columbus, Ohio. But I always thought it was going to be North Carolina. I was driving to North Carolina all the time. At Marshall, what they teach is Route 23 North or 77 South. That's your economic prescription, right? That's your business plan. So I was back then subscribing to, not subscribing, I'd go to the library, the actual library, and pick up the papers from the North Carolina metro areas. I don't even think I ever picked up the Columbus Dispatch. I'm not even sure how that happened. But there were billboards in the Carolinas. I remember coming to Wilmington for a vacation because I had some family friends down there, and these billboards all over the interstates in RTP, for example, said education equals jobs equals income, no education equals no jobs equals no income. And that fascinated me, and it always stuck, and then I ended up being a professor. That was not on my radar back then, but it's very true. And I think if I just finish this with what do these slides show that's important for us to keep in mind? I mean, labor force participation, education attainment, that's the difference between our area and others in one very important way, right? So those of you who are continuing ed, there's all different ways to get more education, but you know, keep at it, keep it in mind, and I think one thing I had was work and work more, and that's the secret, right? That's maybe that's why we all get gray hair, but anyway, I think it's fun. All right. That concludes my talk. So now I think the dean is going to come up and introduce the next speaker. Is that correct? Okay. All right. Thank you very much.